In part one, we talked about recycling and what it would take to recycle everything. Now we're going to look at the first of the 5 things that I believe are necessary to recycle everything. Let's look at the current linear production consumption system. First, of course, we have the raw materials extractors. These are the companies that provide mining, agriculture, logging, dairy, and feedlots. Primary processors are those that produce the ingots of metal, bags of rice, and tanks of chemicals. Parts suppliers create new parts and assemblies for a variety of products. Producers are the manufacturers, and they produce finished goods of all types. Distributors and retail outlets are next, followed by consumers, the individuals, families, governments, and businesses, and finally, landfill operators or incinerators, also at the end of the process, pollution and waste dumps. Now, some of you may have heard of remanufacturing, and remanufacturing is good to the extent that after a product has been used by consumers, it's returned to producers to be refurbished, and then it goes to distributors and retail outlets and back to consumers. But unfortunately, again, after the second or possibly third use, these products go to landfills or incineration. Take-back laws are also a new kind of approach. Basically, these are laws that force producers to take back their products and recover the materials and hopefully make new products out of them. However, for the most part, I believe producers don't know what to do with the stuff either. Now, what I have observed is what I think is a failure of imagination. The green movement has not yet started to question whether the production consumption system has to be this way. Efforts in the green movement are right now attempting to reform the current production consumption system and focus on reducing the flow of materials through the system by slowing it down and decreasing the amount. My question is, how about redesigning the system? Here's what I want you to think about. Once a thing can be imagined, it can be engineered. So how would we redesign this system? First of all, we would put an end to the raw materials extractors and the landfill operators. And then we would take the remaining roles and we would modify them somewhat. We would also add a couple of other roles and form a circle. This new circular system is what I call the System for Material Sustainability. This is a simplified version of the system. The main thing I want you to take note of here is that materials are retained within this system and they do not leave it. We will look at these roles more in depth in just a moment. But first, I'd like to point this out. This is it, the cyclical system that others have talked about. Annie Leonard, Willie McDonough, and Michael Brungart have taken us up to the point where we see the need for a cyclical system, but they stop at the threshold. So let's take a look at the sustainable system. Most of these roles are familiar, but let's take a look at each one briefly and find out how does it work. The material processor no longer processes raw materials. Their new role is to reprocess recyclable materials. The new parts supplier and the producer don't change much except that the producer will now be reusing parts from used products. The distributor leases products to consumers and also takes on the additional role of the collector. This means that they take back used products from consumers. They also test used products that they've gotten back from consumers and they release them to secondary markets. Consumers lease products instead of buying them. The disassembler role is a little bit new. The disassembler will disassemble used products, send the reusable parts back to the producer, and send parts that can't be reused to used parts brokers and materials processors. The used parts broker sells used parts to new parts suppliers and producers. They also sell non-usable parts to the materials processor. This is just a brief, high-level overview of the system. If you'd like to see more detail about how it works, please see the website www.rebk.org, and of course the book. This system doesn't allow materials to escape. Once materials enter into the system, they never leave it. Disposal is eliminated, and so eventually is extraction. Of course, a system like this means some very big changes. Some of the things that would change are, first of all, that landfills would stop growing. Extraction would eventually phase out. Consumers don't own products, they lease them. Producers own materials and track them throughout the cycle. There will be new jobs in collection, disassembly, and resale of used products, and the production and consumption system becomes sustainable. Let's take a look at an example of a company that has already put these concepts into practice. Let's look at the story of Interface. Ray Anderson is the CEO of Interface Flooring. His company is one of the leading makers of carpeting. He experienced an epiphany when he read Paul Hawken's Ecology of Commerce, and he realized that millions of tons of used carpet from his company was entering landfills, and so he realized that he wanted to convert his company over to recycling all of their products. He wrote about his experience in the book Mid-Course Correction. His company is an almost perfect example of a system for material sustainability, because his company can take carpet from any source and of any type and remake it into new carpet with the same quality and durability as the original carpet. And he calls his Mission Zero, zero waste to landfill. And I suggest that you check his website, interfaceflooring.com. And there are other manufacturing companies that are beginning to implement some form of a system for material sustainability. Companies such as Xerox, DuPont, and others, and I talk about them more in my book. Up until now, we've been talking about inorganic systems, meaning those that produce products made of metals, minerals, industrial chemicals, and plastics. But now let's take a look at what I call organic systems. What do we mean by organic systems? These are the systems that produce lumber, crops, orchards, livestock, fishing. And one of the things to be observed about organic systems is that the rate of harvest is limited by the rate of regrowth. We can no longer take more than Earth can actually produce. Used products need to be routed through compost, and organic and inorganic materials should be kept separate in products. So if you look at these handsome Adirondack outdoor chairs here, these wooden chairs look as though they might need some sort of paint or something, and yet what we need to do in the future is no longer paint them with chemicals that would not be suitable for compost. We need to route products such as these to compost, and therefore they should not be treated with anything that would not be suitable for crops. That concludes our discussion of the sustainable systems, and next in Part 3 we'll look at recyclable materials. Please continue to Part 3.